The whispering shadow. The old Victorian on Maplewood Lane was too damn quiet for my taste. Its gables drooped like they were carrying the weight of the world, windows so grimy you'd think nobody had touched them since the Roosevelt administration. When I ditched city life last spring, I figured the peace and quiet would be just what the doctor ordered after years of taxi horns and drunken neighbors. Boy, was I barking up the wrong tree. This wasn't tranquility. It was the kind of heavy silence that makes your skin crawl, like someone's watching but nobody's there. Every little creak of those ancient floorboards might as well have been a gunshot. That's why I ended up with Lyra. Thought having a cat around might breathe some life into this tomb I was calling home. But Lyra? She wasn't your garden variety feline. She showed up in one of those beat-up cardboard carriers from the shelter, golden eyes burning through the slats like she could see right through me. The volunteer, nice lady, bit nervous, kept saying Lyra was peculiar. Didn't make a peep, apparently, but healthy as a horse and needed somewhere to crash. The silence didn't bug me. Hell, I was practically begging for it. Named her after some haunting melody that was stuck in the back of my brain. She slinked into the house, black fur gleaming like she'd been polished, and made herself at home without missing a beat. First night, I'm sprawled on this sorry excuse for a couch, watching her case the joint. Every move calculated, not a sound as she padded across the hardwood. She kept sniffing the air, tail ticking back and forth like a metronome, and I felt this weird wave of relief wash over me. Not alone anymore. But just as I was nodding off, I caught something, a whisper, barely there, like someone had breathed the word, home, right next to my ear. I bolted upright, heart going a mile a minute. Nothing there but Lyra, curled up in a patch of moonlight, eyes glinting like coins. Told myself it was just the house settling, or my brain playing tricks after the move. Come morning, there she was, perched on the kitchen counter, laser-focused on the window. Head cocked like she was tuning into some frequency I couldn't pick up. Called her name, but she was in another world. Then her mouth opened, and what came out wasn't a meow. It was this low, human-like hum that sounded for all the world like gone. Nearly dropped my coffee mug right there. Cats don't talk, that's crazy talk. I laughed it off, blamed it on being dead on my feet, but the hairs on my neck stood at attention as she hopped down and disappeared down the hall. As the days rolled by, the whispers kept coming. Never when I was looking straight at her, always catching me off guard. I'd be nose deep in a book or elbow deep in dishwater, and this voice, soft as a secret, eerily human, would drift in from nowhere. Cold, it said once while I was huddled by the fireplace. Stay. Another night as I was locking up. Each time, Lyra would be nearby, staring into space, mouth shut tight. Started wondering if I was losing my marbles in this godforsaken house. Was it the pipes? The wind? My sanity circling the drain? Tried to catch her red-handed. Would pretend to read while keeping an eye on her lounging on the rug. Fat lot of good that did. She'd just groom herself, quiet as the grave, or snooze in a sunbeam without making a sound. But the second I looked away, bam, the whispers would start up again. Little snippets of words, half-baked sentences, always in that same soft, sing-song voice. Watch, as I was chopping veggies. Close, as I headed upstairs. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, dreams tangled up with voices I couldn't place. One night, I propped up my phone to record while I crashed. Lyra was curled up at the foot of my bed, and despite everything, having her there was oddly comforting. Woke up to the sound of my own buzzsaw snoring on the recording, but underneath it was something that made my blood run cold. A voice, clear as day, saying, "Find me." Then after a beat, "Not alone." Played it back 3 times to be sure. Lyra just stared at me, blinking slowly like we were sharing some inside joke. Called the shelter the next day with shaky hands, asking about her backstory. The volunteer sounded confused. "Just a stray," she said. "Found in an alley, no collar, no chip. Quiet as a church mouse, but sweet as pie." Pressed for more details, but came up empty. No previous owners, no paper trail, nada. Hung up feeling like the walls were closing in. Lyra watched from the windowsill, tail swinging like a hypnotist's watch. That evening, I sat in the living room, playing that recording on loop. Find me. Not alone. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Was it actually Lyra, or something else using her as its personal megaphone? I'd always laughed at ghost stories, but now the house felt like it had a pulse, walls practically humming with secrets. Started noticing other weird stuff, shadows that hung around too long in corners, cold spots wherever Lyra spent time. Once, I could have sworn I saw her reflection move in the mirror before she did, her head turning toward me while she was out cold. Stopped leaving the house altogether. Work became a blur of half-assed emails and lame excuses. Had to get to the bottom of this. Started following Lyra around like a private eye, noting her hotspots. The basement door, the attic hatch, that creepy closet under the stairs. Each time, the whispers tagged along. Here, when she scratched at the basement door. Up, when she fixated on the attic. Didn't have the guts to open either one yet. Fear had me pinned to the floor, but curiosity was eating me alive. Then came the night I woke up to a silence so complete it felt like being underwater. No Lyra on the bed. Stumbled through the house calling for her, voice bouncing off the walls. Found her in the kitchen, sitting in front of the basement door like she was standing guard, eyes glowing like embers in the dark. The air felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, clear as a bell, a voice that didn't come from her, but from the door itself. "Come!" "See." My hand shook like a leaf as I reached for the doorknob. Lyra just stared, her silence more deafening than any sound I'd ever heard. The door groaned open to reveal a staircase swallowed by darkness. The whispers cranked up to 11, a whole damn choir of voices talking over each other. "Find me. Not alone. Come." Took one step, then another, cold air biting at my skin. Lyra shadowed me, right on my heels. Whatever waited in that basement, I wasn't sure I wanted to find it, but I was way past the point of no return. Man, those basement steps practically screamed bloody murder when I went down them, like they were begging me to turn back. The deeper I went, the more that damp chill wrapped around me like some clingy ex who won't take a hint. Lyra was right on my heels, padding along quiet as a ghost, those amber eyes of hers catching whatever scraps of light filtered down from upstairs. The second I'd cracked open that door, those whispers cut out cold. But let me tell you, that silence felt heavier than a ton of bricks. My flashlight beam bounced all over the place, lighting up walls that had seen better days and cobwebs dancing like they were auditioning for a horror flick. I kept telling myself to get a grip. It's just a basement, for crying out loud, but my heart was doing the rumble against my ribs. The floor at the bottom was a hot mess, uneven as hell and scattered with the island of misfit junk, a wheel rusted to kingdom come, some busted mirror, and boxes that looked like science experiments gone wrong. Lyra shot past me like she was late for dinner and planted herself by the far wall, staring at this weird dark patch like it was the most fascinating thing since catnip. When I got closer, I nearly jumped out of my skin. That stain looked freakishly human, like somebody had been pressed against the wall and left their shadow behind. I reached out, don't ask me why, and hovered my fingers over it. The air got thick as molasses, and that silence tightened around my throat. Then out of nowhere, "Touch!" whispered right from the damn wall itself. I froze up, my hand hanging there like an idiot's. Lyra just kept drilling holes in me with those eyes, like she was daring me to do it. I yanked my hand back, my ticker skipping beats. This whole situation was 50 shades of wrong. I tried to bail, but Lyra let out this hiss I'd never heard before, sounded like something straight out of hell. She wouldn't budge an inch, just kept eyeballing that wall like it owed her money. I called her name, my voice cracking like a teenager's, but she was having none of it. The whisper came back, louder this time. Stay. See. I swung that flashlight around like a madman, hunting for whatever was messing with me, but there was nothing but shadows and dust bunnies. Then the beam caught Lyra's reflection in that busted mirror across the room, and I felt my blood turn to ice. Her reflection was standing upright, head cocked at this thick angle that no cat's neck should manage. I stumbled backward, butterfingers that I am, and dropped the flashlight. It hit the floor and the beam went spinning like a disco ball before landing on the mirror. The reflection had pulled a Houdini, but now the whispers were multiplying like rabbits. Here. Now. Find. I snatched up that flashlight and made tracks for the stairs, Lyra's hiss chasing me like I owed it cash. I slammed that door shut so hard the house probably jumped, leaning against it while my lungs tried to catch up. And there was Lyra, cool as a cucumber in the kitchen, acting like she'd never set paw in that basement. Sleep? Fat chance. I camped out on the couch all night, basement door locked tight and the key burning a hole in my pocket. Lyra just perched on the windowsill, her eyes lit up like twin moons in the dark. I tried to talk myself down. Old houses make weird noises, right? Pipes groan, drafts whisper sweet nothings. But Lyra's silence, those two human murmurs, the way she seemed to know stuff I didn't, it was eating at me like acid. I needed answers, but you couldn't pay me enough to go back down those stairs. Next day, I went full detective mode around the house, starting with the attic to avoid the basement's siren call. The attic hatch fought me tooth and nail, sealed up with years of paint and gunk. When I finally pried it open, I got a face full of dust from my troubles. The place was packed tighter than a sardine can, old trunks, broken furniture, and the smell of decay thick enough to chew on. Lyra shadowed me like she was on a mission, stopping dead at this little wooden box tucked under a beam, covered in weird loopy carvings. After a moment's hesitation, I popped it open. Inside was this bundle of ancient-looking letters tied with a ribbon that had seen better days. The handwriting was all spidery, ink faded to hell and back, but I could still make out the words. They talked about some family from way back, a kid who'd vanished into thin air, and whispers coming from the walls. One letter from 1923 mentioned some presence that used animals as its personal megaphone, luring folks to hidden spots. My hands were shaking like leaves as I read that bit. Lyra just sat there, laser-focused on those letters, and I swear I heard this faint humming sound, like a voice warming up. Read, it seemed to say. I lost track of time going through those letters, each one creepier than the last. They described some ritual about binding a spirit to the house using a vessel, an animal, maybe? The last letter wasn't even finished, just panic scrawled across the page. It speaks through her. It wants out. I looked at Lyra, her eyes giving nothing away, and felt a chill that made the basement feel like the tropics. Was she the vessel? Or was something else using her to get to me? That night, the whispers came back with a vengeance, louder and pushier than before. They seemed to come from everywhere at once. Open. Come. See. I clutched those letters like a lifeline, my brain working overtime. Lyra paced around like she had ants in her fur, her eyes darting to the basement door every few seconds. Deep down, I knew I couldn't dodge this forever. Whatever was down there, whatever was using her as its personal telephone, It wanted me to find it. I got to my feet, that key feeling like a brick in my pocket, and took a step toward the door. Lyra followed right behind, her silence screaming louder than any voice could in that quiet as the grave house. Man, that basement door gave me the creeps. All warped and beat up like it had seen some serious shit. My hand was shaking when I grabbed the key, cold metal against my sweaty palm. My cat Lyra was just sitting there, laser focused on the door with those weird golden eyes of hers. The whispers had shut up again, but honestly, that was worse, like when you know something's about to pounce. I turned the key and it made this nasty snap like breaking bones. Then the door swung open with a groan, blasting me with this gross, freezing air. I crept down those stairs, flashlight cutting through the darkness, with Lyra stalking behind me, silent as death but heavy as guilt. The basement looked the same, dusty junk everywhere, and that freaky human-shaped stain on the wall. But something felt off, like the air had thickened up. My heart was going nuts as I moved toward the stain and ran my fingers over the concrete. Jesus, it was ice cold, and I swear to God, it was pulsing under my fingers like some kind of heartbeat. Lyra started hissing, belly low to the ground, staring daggers at the wall. I pressed harder, feeling around for anything, a crack, a seam, whatever. Then click! Part of the wall pushed in, showing this skinny passage. Dust swirled everywhere in my flashlight beam, and the air got even colder with this faint smell of rot. Those damn whispers came back, all urgent and talking over each other. Inside. Now. Find. My gut was doing somersaults, but no way was I backing out now. I squeezed through that gap with Lyra darting ahead of me. The passage was tight as hell, rough, damp walls and a ceiling so low I had to hunch over like Quasimodo. It opened into this tiny room, barely bigger than a closet, with walls covered in those bizarre loopy symbols I'd seen on that box in the attic. In the middle sat this stone table with dark stains, and on it, just one thing, this small, tarnished locket. Lyra jumped right up on the table, fixated on the locket, and then, I shit you not, she spoke. Not a whisper, an actual word. Open! Her mouth moved in this completely uncat-like way. I stumbled backward, flashlight shaking like crazy. Cats don't fucking talk. But there was no denying her voice, soft and human with this accent that definitely wasn't mine. With trembling fingers, I grabbed the locket and popped it open. Inside was this old photo of a young girl with these haunted eyes and a terrified expression. The whispers exploded around me, not soft anymore but sharp and demanding. Free. Now. Me. I dropped that thing like it was radioactive, metal clanging against stone. Lyra watched it fall, all tense, and I swear in the locket's reflection I saw not a cat but a girl, the same one from the photo, mouth open in a silent scream. I bolted out of there, breathing like I'd run a marathon, and slammed that passage shut behind me. Weirdly, Lyra was already in the basement, sitting there cool as a cucumber like she'd never even gone in. I locked that basement door tight and spent all night going down internet rabbit holes about the house's history. Found some old newspaper articles about a family from the 1920s, couple and their daughter who vanished into thin air. The articles mentioned weird stuff, neighbors hearing whispers, animals acting strange. One even talked about a black cat, silent but watchful, found near the house after the family disappeared. My skin was crawling reading this stuff. Lyra just sat on my desk the whole time, staring at me, never blinking. Sleep? Forget about it. The whispers got louder, leaking through the walls, not just in the basement anymore. Free. Me. Now. I'd grabbed the locket in a moment of stupid bravery, and kept studying the girl's face. Couldn't have been more than 10, hair tied with a ribbon, eyes begging for help. Was she the one whispering? Was Lyra somehow connected to her, or something else entirely? Next day, I called this local history buff named Margaret who'd written about the town's old houses. She listened to my crazy story about the whispers, the locket, the hidden room. When she finally spoke, her voice was dead serious. "That house has a history," she told me. "The family there, they were into some dark stuff. Some kind of ritual. They thought they could trap a spirit, bind it to something living. The daughter was supposed to be the key, but something went sideways." I hung up feeling like my brain was short-circuiting. Lyra was back at the basement door, pawing at it, giving me this look. The whispers had become this constant background noise following me everywhere. I knew I had to go back and face whatever was waiting in that room. So I grabbed the locket and my flashlight, scared shitless but determined. Lyra led the way, quiet as the grave, as I opened that door and headed down one more time. Man, that basement hit different this time around, like it was just sitting there, waiting for me to show up. The air? Thick as molasses, I swear, and the cold just seeped right into my bones. My cat Lyra was leading the charge, her midnight fur practically vanishing into the shadows, those eyes of hers like little lighthouse beacons guiding me to that hidden spot. Those whispers weren't even words anymore, just this constant, pulsing rhythm, kinda like some ghostly heartbeat echoing through the walls. I was white-knuckling that locket the whole time, the metal weirdly warm against my palm, total opposite of the freezing air around us. That girl's face in the photo? Haunting doesn't even cover it. Those wide, terrified eyes practically screaming for help without making a sound. I squeezed through that narrow passage, scraping my shoulders raw on those rough walls. The hidden room looked exactly the same, that stone table standing stark in my flashlight beam, those weird looping symbols on the walls seeming to dance and twist in the flickering light. Lyra jumped right up on the table, laser-focused on the exact spot where I dropped the locket last time. And there it was, still glinting faintly, like it had been patiently waiting too. The whispers suddenly cranked up to 11, forming actual words again. "Free. Me. Now." And they weren't coming from my cat. They were everywhere, in the air, the walls, hell, even the locket itself seemed to be speaking. My hands were shaking like leaves when I picked it up and popped it open again. The girl's photo stared back, but something was off. Her eyes seemed to track my movements, her mouth twitching like she was desperately trying to speak. I slammed that thing shut, my breath catching in my throat. Lyra cocked her head in this weird way, and then, I kid you not, she spoke, her voice unnervingly human, her mouth moving all wrong. "Help," she said, plain as day. I stumbled backward, dropping my flashlight with a clatter. The room started spinning, those whispers now a deafening roar in my ears. I bolted, shoving my way through that passage and back into the main basement, slamming the hidden door behind me. Somehow Lyra was already there, sitting calmly like she'd never moved an inch. I locked that basement door tight and practically fell up the stairs, still clutching that damn locket. The whispers followed me, quieter now but relentless, like they were seeping up through the floorboards. I collapsed on the couch, staring at the locket, trying to make sense of the whole mess. Was this girl trapped somehow? Was Lyra channeling her voice, or was something darker using her to reel me in? I grabbed those old letters from the attic again, squinting at that spidery handwriting. One mentioned some ritual for binding a spirit, using a living vessel and an object as an anchor. The locket, that was the anchor. The girl's photograph with those terrified eyes, it was her, somehow trapped, her spirit bound to this house. But why my cat? Was Lyra the vessel, or had something else hijacked her? I called Margaret again, my voice cracking as I described everything, the room, the locket, Lyra speaking. She went dead silent for what felt like forever before finally saying, That ritual was supposed to protect the house. But something went sideways. The girl, she wasn't meant to be the sacrifice. Something else took her place, something that's been lurking there ever since. She paused, and I could practically hear her swallow. If you're hearing her now, it's because whatever's in there wants out. And your cat, it's not just a cat anymore. I hung up, my mind a complete dumpster fire of fear and questions. Lyra sat at my feet, staring up with those unblinking eyes, her silence somehow louder than all those whispers. I needed to end this madness, free the girl, stop whatever was using my cat. I dug through a trunk in the attic and found this old book on local folklore that described rituals for banishing spirits, using salt, iron, and sheer willpower. I grabbed what I needed, kitchen salt, an ancient iron poker from the fireplace, and headed back down to the basement with Lyra shadowing my every move. That hidden room felt like it had shrunk, the air so thick I could barely pull it into my lungs. I poured a circle of salt around the table, my hands surprisingly steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. I placed the open locket in the center, the girl's face staring upward. Lyra watched, her body coiled tight as a spring, her eyes practically glowing. I gripped that iron poker and started reciting words from the book, a clumsy, desperate prayer for release. The whispers went absolutely nuts, a storm of voices, some begging, some furious. Stop. Stay. Mine! Lyra let out this bone-chilling hiss, her back arching, and for a split second, her shadow on the wall wasn't a cat's shadow at all, it was human, small and trembling. I pushed on, my voice getting louder, that iron poker heavy as lead in my hand. The air crackled with electricity, those symbols on the walls glowing faintly before fading away. The locket shuddered violently, the photograph curling like it was burning up. The whispers cut out, replaced by this single, piercing scream, not from Lyra, but the girl's voice, echoing inside my skull. And then nothing. Dead silence. Lyra collapsed in a heap, breathing shallow but steady. The locket was empty now, the photograph gone, the metal cold and lifeless in my palm. I scooped up Lyra and carried her upstairs on shaky legs, locking that basement door behind me for good measure. The whole house felt lighter somehow, the air less suffocating, but I couldn't shake this nagging feeling that something was still there, watching, waiting for its chance. The house had gone quiet again, but not in the way it used to be. That suffocating silence from when I first moved in? Gone. Now there was just this fragile calm, like walking on thin ice after a blizzard. Lyra was sprawled out on the sofa, breathing evenly, those amber eyes of hers still sharp but somehow dimmed. That damn locket sat on the coffee table, hollow inside, a mocking reminder of what I thought I'd accomplished. The ritual seemed to have worked. No more whispers, no more weird vibrations in the air, and the basement was just a basement again. Or so I told myself. But something kept eating away at me. Had I actually freed that girl, or just pissed off something worse? Lyra hadn't uttered a word since that night. She still moved with that same calculated grace, but the way she watched me now was different, less intense, more normal. God, I wanted to believe she was just a regular cat again, but I couldn't shake the memory of her speaking. Help, she'd said. That single word haunted me like a bad scar. I steered clear of the basement now, kept that door locked tight with the key stuffed in a drawer. The house felt safer, sure, but not safe. Shadows still seemed to dance in the corners, and sometimes in the dead of night, I swore I could hear this faint humming, too quiet to be certain of anything. I spent days with my nose buried in research, combing through sketchy websites and those musty old books from the attic. According to that folklore book, spirits can sometimes get stuck here, leaving behind fragments of themselves like echoes trapped in a canyon. If the girl's spirit had been bound to that locket, with Lyra as its vessel, what the hell had I unleashed? And was anything still lingering? I reached out to Margaret again, but she just gave me the runaround, her voice tinged with obvious unease. "You've stirred up something," she warned. "Watch yourself. It might not be gone." One afternoon, I caught Lyra staring at the attic entrance, her tail flicking back and forth like a metronome. I hadn't ventured up there since finding those letters, but her fixation gave me the creeps. Up the ladder I went, sweeping my flashlight across the cramped space. That wooden box with the bizarre symbols was still there, but something else caught my eye, a small, leather-bound journal wedged behind a beam. The pages felt like they might crumble between my fingers, the ink faded but still readable. It belonged to the girl's mother, dated the same year she vanished. The entries got increasingly desperate, describing some ritual gone sideways, a spirit they tried to control but couldn't handle. "It speaks through the cat," one entry said. "It wants her, but we can't let it take her." The final page was basically a desperate plea. "If you find this, free her. Break the bond." My stomach dropped. I'd convinced myself the locket was the anchor, but what if that was just part of the equation? What if Lyra was still tethered to something I couldn't even see? That night, I jolted awake to a noise, not whispering this time, but a soft scratching coming from above. Lyra was nowhere on the couch. Heart pounding, I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the ladder. There she was, pawing at that wooden box, her eyes gleaming in the darkness. The air felt thick again, the silence alive with that faint hum. I opened the box expecting to find those letters, but it was empty except for a single folded note. The handwriting wasn't the mother's. This was fresh ink. "Not free," it said. "Still here." I dropped that note like it was on fire, my hands shaking like leaves. Lyra cocked her head and made this sound, not a word, but this low, eerily human-like hum. The sound grew, filling the attic, the house, even my skull. It wasn't her voice, or the girl's, it was something else entirely, something ancient and deep, a sound no human ear was meant to hear. I practically fell down that ladder, Lyra following behind, her movements slow and deliberate. The house felt alive again, walls seemingly pulsing, shadows reaching toward me like fingers. I tried another ritual, salt scattered everywhere, waving that iron poker around, reciting words from the book like some half-assed exorcist. But the humming never stopped. It followed me everywhere, getting louder near the basement door, softer when I held Lyra, as if she was both the source and some kind of shield. I couldn't just abandon her to whatever this was. She was my cat, my buddy, but clearly something more, something I'd unwittingly brought into this house. Days and nights blurred together. I stopped checking emails, stopped leaving the house altogether. That constant hum was a nagging reminder that I hadn't won Jack. Lyra stayed glued to my side, her silence both comforting and unnerving. I knew I had to face it again, the basement, that room, whatever the hell was still lingering there. I clutched the empty locket, and that journal, its warnings crystal clear. This wasn't my house anymore. It belonged to the girl, to Lyra, to whatever was speaking through them both. I stood at the basement door, key in hand, Lyra beside me. The humming was louder now, like a siren call I couldn't ignore. Whatever weighted down there wasn't finished with me yet. I turned the key, the door groaning open, and stepped into the darkness with Lyra's glowing eyes behind me. The house seemed to hold its breath, and I knew, with a bone-deep certainty that chilled me to my core, this was far from over. The whisper in the frame. The attic reeked of time's forgotten treasures, that unmistakable cocktail of dust, mothballs, and aged timber that hits you right in the chest. Emily's knees dug into decades of grime as she sifted through her grandmother's lifetime of collected memories. The old Victorian monstrosity in Willow Creek's heart was hers now, whether she wanted it or not. Gran's will had been crystal clear: sort it, sell it, move on. Simple enough in theory, but God, it felt like peeling back the scabs of her own childhood, those endless summers spent roaming these halls. She cracked open an ancient cedar chest that protested with a mournful creak. Inside lay the usual suspects: love letters gone yellow with age, chipped porcelain knickknacks that once meant something to someone, and a leather photo album that had seen better days, its rose pattern barely hanging on. Emily hesitated. Did she really want to go down this rabbit hole? Before flipping it open, the pages practically screamed as they separated, revealing snapshots frozen in time: Gran rocking a polka dot number, her dad as a gap-toothed rugrat, and then, tucked between pages like a dirty secret, a lone Polaroid. It was her all right, 7 years old, standing in Gran's garden in a sundress with those ridiculous pigtails her mother insisted on, beaming at whoever held the camera with that clueless kid joy that life eventually beats out of you. But something was off. Behind her, just over her shoulder, what the hell was that? Some kind of smoke? No, more deliberate. A tendril of something not quite right, blurry yet somehow precise, writhing upward from her mouth like it had business to attend to. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had zero recollection of this picture, let alone whatever that thing was. Her fingers trembled as she squinted at the anomaly. This wasn't some light trick or smudge. This thing had purpose. The photo slipped from her fingers, landing face down with a soft pat. Her heart hammered as she reached for it again, half expecting the thing to have pulled a disappearing act. No such luck. If anything, the creepy tendril looked sharper now, more defined, like a finger stretching toward freedom. Emily stuffed the photo into her pocket like it might bite her, goosebumps racing across her skin. The attic suddenly felt like a tomb, the air thick as soup. She bolted downstairs, that damned photo burning a hole in more than just her pocket. In the kitchen's harsh fluorescent glare, she laid the Polaroid on the table like evidence at a crime scene. The house held its breath, save for the grandfather clock's relentless ticking down the hall. She forced herself to look again. The garden was exactly as she remembered. Gran's prize-winning roses, that crooked apple tree that never quite stood straight. But that thing in the background was from another world entirely. It wasn't just coming from her mouth. It was part of her, an extension of her 7-year-old self caught in chemical suspension. Her stomach did somersaults. Was she losing it? No, the thing was right there, plain as day. Her mind raced back through those childhood summers. She'd been a loner, always poking around the house's hidden corners while Gran puttered in her garden. But there were holes in the story, blank spots that felt like dead air. She remembered standing in that exact garden spot, sun warming her cheeks, but nothing about a camera or whatever that was. Yet here it sat, immortalized in fading chemicals. Her phone's buzz nearly launched her through the ceiling. Just Mark, checking in. She thought about spilling her guts. Hey cuz, found a photo where something's crawling out of child me. Thoughts? But thought better of it. He'd think she'd finally cracked. Maybe she had. She fired off a quick, all good, and set the phone down. The house groaned around her, like it knew she was lying. She glanced back at the photo and felt ice water replace her blood. The tendril had shifted, subtle, but unmistakable, reaching further across the image, its tip curled in invitation. She blinked hard enough to see stars, telling herself it was just exhaustion playing tricks. She hadn't slept worth a damn since arriving, the house's constant symphony of creaks keeping her on edge. But when her vision cleared, the tendril remained in its new position, mocking her sanity. Her heart raced as she grabbed Gran's magnifying glass from the desk. Under scrutiny, the tendril revealed itself as something woven from shadows, with what looked disturbingly like eyes glinting from its core. Emily's mouth went desert dry as Gran's old bedtime warning echoed in her head. The house listens, Emily. It holds onto things. Be careful what you give it. As a kid, she'd written it off as typical grandparent weirdness, but now those words carried the weight of prophecy. Had she unknowingly fed the house something that summer? Something it wasn't ready to return. She paced the kitchen like a caged animal, leaving the photo on the table like it might spontaneously combust. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation. Her memories of that time were a jigsaw with half the pieces missing. There was one place she hadn't checked, the garden itself. If that's where the photo was taken, maybe that's where answers lurked. The night air bit at her skin as she stepped outside. Moonlight carved long shadows through Gran's neglected roses. The apple tree loomed overhead, its branches twisted like arthritic fingers. Emily positioned herself where Little-her had stood, clutching the photo like a talisman. The garden held its breath. She aligned the Polaroid with the scene before her, and for one heart-stopping moment, the tendrils seemed to pulse with life, not just in the photo but in the air itself, a ripple, like heat rising from sun-baked asphalt. Her breath clouded in the chill, and then she heard it, a whisper, soft but deliberate, floating from the direction of the house. Not wind, not leaves, something trying to speak. Emily froze, eyes darting to the house's darkened windows. The whisper grew clearer, not louder but more focused, condensing into a single word. Stay. She stumbled backward, catching her heel on a root. The photo slipped from her grasp, landing face up in the dirt. As she bent to retrieve it, reality shifted. The tendril had vanished from the image. Her child self smiled up at her, but the background was pristine, just roses and the apple tree. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she scanned the garden, half expecting to see the thing slithering through the grass. The whisper returned, closer now, somehow inside her head. Stay. Emily bolted for the house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The photo remained clutched in her white-knuckled grip, but she couldn't bear to look at it again. She threw the deadbolt, hands shaking like leaves, and pressed her back against the door, straining to hear. The house had fallen silent, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was alive, and its eyes were fixed squarely on her. I couldn't sleep a wink that night. Just sat there at the kitchen table, with that damn Polaroid turned face down like if I didn't look at it, maybe what I'd seen would just vanish into thin air. The house was dead quiet. You know that kind of silence that practically pounds in your ears. Every little creak in the floorboards, every whisper of wind felt like some kind of message, echoing that word I'd heard out in the garden. Stay. God, it stuck in my head like a splinter under a fingernail, impossible to dig out. By morning, I was running on fumes, but too freaked out to actually feel tired. I needed answers, and this creepy old house was all I had to go on. Started tearing through the living room, where Gran's ancient furniture was still hiding under those dusty covers. The whole place reeked of old upholstery, and that waxy polish she always used. I went through every drawer, shelf, and looked behind all those faded family portraits, praying I'd find another photo or maybe a journal, anything that might explain what the hell that tendril thing was. I hid pay dirt in this cabinet under the stairs, a box full of old toys. There was this one-eyed rag doll that gave me the willies, a wooden train set, and this tarnished music box. When I wound it up, half expecting the thing to be busted, it played this halting, skin-crawling tune that tickled something in the back of my brain. Sitting in this very room as a kid, Gran humming along, but the memory was all fuzzy around the edges, like someone had taken an eraser to parts of it. Upstairs was even worse. Gran's bedroom felt heavy somehow, like the air itself was holding its breath. Her wardrobe was full of musty old dresses and the shoebox stuffed with letters that said absolutely nothing about the house being weird or my summers here. But then, jackpot, a small locked diary in the bottom dresser drawer, leather all cracked with age. The lock was a joke, one paperclip and I was in. Gran's handwriting was all tight and slanted, but most entries were boring as hell, grocery lists, gardening notes, and these weird comments about keeping the house happy. What the actual hell? Then I spotted this entry from when I was 7. She's curious, always wandering where she shouldn't. I worry what she'll find. The house knows her now. My stomach did a full somersault. The house knows me? I flipped through like a woman possessed, but the diary just stopped. Last entry all smudged to hell and back. I stuffed it in my bag. I was gonna read every single word later if it killed me. The basement was next, a place I'd steered clear of as a kid. Those narrow stairs, my flashlight doing that horror movie flicker as I went down. The air was damp and smelled like dirt and something sour, like fruit gone bad. The place was a hoarder's paradise. Crates and furniture everywhere, shadows dancing as my light moved. Found a stack of framed pictures leaning against the wall, glass all grimy. One caught my eye, family portrait with Dad and Gran smiling, but in the background. Christ, there it was. A faint blur, just like the tendril in my Polaroid. I wiped the glass clean, heart hammering against my ribs. The blur was definitely there, hovering by Dad's shoulder. Not as in your face as my photo, but unmistakably the same damn thing. Not some film flaw or trick of the light. This was real. I checked the other frames with shaking hands. Every single photo. A shadow, a smudge, a tendril, always lurking near someone in the family, always with that same creepy, deliberate movement. Some barely visible, others bold as brass. My flashlight flickered again, and I swear the basement got darker, the shadows thicker. Then I heard it, not in the air but inside my own head, soft but insistent. Stay. I spun around like an idiot, expecting to see someone, but I was alone. The whisper came again, clearer this time, almost begging. I backed toward the stairs, sweeping my flashlight around like a madwoman. Something moved in the corner, quick, skittering, like a spider ducking out of the light. I didn't stick around to find out what. I bolted up those stairs and slammed the door so hard the whole house shook. Back in the kitchen, I checked the Polaroid again. The tendril was different now, thicker, more defined, like it had been hitting the gym while I was gone. I dropped it like it was on fire, hands shaking like leaves. It had to be the house doing this. Had to be. I remembered Gran's cryptic warning about giving the house something, and now I was wondering if it wasn't just my childhood curiosity the house had snagged, but something deeper, something essential. I called Mark, voice cracking as I told him about the photo and the whispers. He gave me that "you're being dramatic" tone. It's an old house, Em. Just creepy vibes. But in my gut I knew better. This house wasn't just old, it was alive, and it remembered me. Couldn't bring myself to stay there that night. Drove to this dingy motel in town, locked the Polaroid in the glove compartment. Fat lot of good it did, even in that sterile room with its cheap air freshener. I felt it, that whisper, faint but relentless, following me. Sleep was a joke, my brain spinning with questions. What was this tendril thing? Why was it photobombing every family picture? And why the hell did the house want me to stay so badly? Come morning, I dragged myself back to the house, determined to face whatever this was. The air felt different, charged, like right before a thunderstorm. Standing in the garden again, Polaroid clutched in my sweaty palm. The whisper came, not from the house but from the photo itself, a low hum that vibrated in my bones. I looked down at the image and my blood turned to ice water. The tendril was moving again, not just in the photo but in the air around me, a faint, writhing shadow reaching out like it wanted to touch me. Emily froze in the garden, the Polaroid quivering between her fingers. That damn tendril wasn't just trapped in the photo anymore. It was right here, shimmering faintly like heat rising off summer pavement, but with an eerie sense of purpose. It hovered uncomfortably close, not quite touching her but near enough to send chills down her spine. "Stay," came the whisper again, gentle yet unmistakably commanding, as if the garden itself had found its voice. She stumbled backward, heart hammering against her ribs, and bolted for the house, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the windows. The tendril didn't follow, thank God, but its presence lingered like the scent of something rotting beneath the floorboards. Inside, the house felt unnervingly quiet, the air thick as molasses with anticipation. She locked the Polaroid in a drawer, as if that could bottle up whatever nightmare was unfolding. Her phone buzzed, Mark texting he'd swing by in an hour. She desperately needed him to see this photo, to confirm she wasn't losing her marbles. But waiting felt like playing with fire, like giving the house time to sink its claws deeper. She fished Gran's diary from her bag and plopped down at the kitchen table, thumbing through its pages for any crumb of explanation. The diary was frustratingly cryptic, filled with Gran's bizarre musings about the house. One entry jumped out, dated a year before that summer when Emily was 7. "The roots run deeper than anyone knows. They cradle more than just soil. I tried to sound the alarm, but deaf ears don't hear warnings. Now it's stirring from its slumber." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Roots? Stirring? Her mind flashed to the garden, that twisted old apple tree, the roses Gran had obsessively tended like they were her children. Was this tendril somehow connected to the garden? To the house itself? She kept scanning, hungry for something concrete. Another entry closer to that summer mentioned some kind of ritual to keep the house in good spirits. Gran wrote about leaving offerings, flowers, herbs, even blood from a pricked finger, placed in the garden when the clock struck midnight. Emily's stomach did a somersault. Gran had always been a bit of an oddball, but this reeked of something beyond mere superstition. This smelled like pure, unadulterated fear. She snapped the diary shut and paced the kitchen like a caged animal, thoughts racing a mile a minute. The tendril, those whispers, this house, they were all tangled together in some twisted root system she couldn't begin to comprehend. She remembered digging in the garden as a kid, unearthing strange treasures, oddly warm, smooth stones, fragments of bone she naively assumed were from squirrels or birds. Had she accidentally disturbed something? Given the house some kind of foothold, just as Gran had warned against? The doorbell's chime nearly made her jump out of her skin. Mark stood on the porch, his usual easygoing smile replaced by a furrowed brow. She thrust the Polaroid at him, studying his face as he examined it. "What the hell is that?" he asked, squinting at the tendril. "It looks... Christ, it looks alive." She spilled everything, the whisper, the basement photos, the diary. He listened, his skepticism melting away like ice in August. "This place always gave me the heebie-jeebies," he admitted. "Remember how Gran used to talk about it having a heart, like it was some living thing?" They decided to tackle the garden together, armed with flashlights and a rusty shovel from the shed. The sun was dipping below the horizon, stretching shadows that transformed the roses into something that looked unsettlingly like claws. Emily pointed to the spot where she'd taken the photo, near that gnarled apple tree. Mark started digging, the shovel biting into earth that seemed to give way too easily, as if it had been turned recently, which made zero sense, since Gran hadn't set foot here in months. About a foot down, the shovel clanked against something solid. Mark cleared away the dirt, revealing a wooden box carved with intricate patterns that seemed to dance under the flashlight beam. Emily's heart raced. Something about the box felt wrong, like it was watching them with invisible eyes. Mark pried it open to find a bundle of cloth wrapped around something soft. As he unfolded it, Emily's breath hitched. Inside lay a lock of hair, her hair, unmistakably the same chestnut shade as in the Polaroid, and a small, blackened object that resembled a shriveled root. "What in God's name is this?" Mark whispered, voice tight as a drum. Emily had no clue, but seeing her own hair made her head spin. The whisper returned, louder now, seeming to emanate from the tree above. "Stay." Mark heard it too, she could tell by the way his eyes widened to saucers. He dropped the box like it had burned him, and the root-like thing actually twitched, as if startled. Emily grabbed his arm, yanking him toward the house. The air practically buzzed now, charged with something ancient, and the tendril reappeared, a faint outline against the twilight, curling toward them like a beckoning finger. Back inside, they slammed and locked the door, both breathing like they'd run a marathon. Mark clutched the box, white-knuckled, refusing to let it go. "We need to figure out what the hell this is," he insisted. Emily nodded, but her eyes drifted to the drawer where she'd stashed the Polaroid. She retrieved it with trembling hands. The tendril had changed again, thicker now, more substantial, its tip touching the edge of the frame as if testing the boundaries of its prison. They huddled at the table, the box and photo between them like bombs waiting to detonate. Mark unwrapped the root thing again, examining it under the harsh kitchen light. It wasn't a root at all. It was leathery, almost fleshy, with tiny veins threading through it like a road map. Emily's stomach churned. "It's part of whatever that thing is," she said. "Whatever's in the photo, it's connected to this." Mark agreed, face ashen. He suggested burning it, but Emily hesitated. What if that just pissed it off? The whisper returned, not from outside but from within the walls themselves, a chorus of voices now, all demanding, "Stay." The lights flickered like they were sending Morse code, and the air turned cold enough to raise goosebumps. Emily snatched up the diary again, flipping frantically to the ritual entry. Gran had written about binding something, keeping it contained in the garden. Had she been trying to trap this tendril thing? Or feed it, like throwing meat to a caged tiger? Mark stood abruptly, gripping the shovel like a weapon. "We're digging up that entire garden. All of it." Emily wasn't convinced that was the smartest move, but she followed him outside anyway. Night had fallen completely now, the moon playing hide-and-seek behind clouds. As they dug, the whispers grew louder, a symphony of voices rising from the earth itself. The tendril materialized again, not in the photo but right there in the air, writhing like a snake in pain. Emily's scream tore through the night, and Mark swung the shovel with all his might, but it passed through the tendril as if it were nothing but cigarette smoke. They bolted back inside, Mark still clutching that damned box. The house felt different now, the walls seeming to pulse with a rhythm Emily could feel deep in her chest, like a second heartbeat. The Polaroid sat on the table, though she had no memory of leaving it there. The tendril had vanished from the image, but the air around them felt thick with its presence, like wading through invisible mud. The whisper had transformed into an undeniable command that seemed to echo from every corner. "Stay." The house wasn't just a house anymore. It had become something alive, with walls that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat Emily could feel deep in her bones. She and Mark stood frozen in the kitchen, that damn Polaroid and the weird box sitting between them on the table like a ticking bomb. The creepy tendril had vanished from the photo, but Emily kept catching glimpses of it dancing at the edges of her vision, a shadow that slithered whenever she wasn't looking straight at it. What started as a faint whisper had grown into a full-blown chorus, an endless, maddening chant of "stay" that seemed to bounce off every wall. Mark was white as a sheet, clutching the shovel like it was a lifeline. "We've got to get the hell out of here," he said, his voice cracking. But Emily had this sinking feeling they were already trapped. With shaky hands, she flipped through Gran's diary again, desperately scanning for answers. That ritual entry was their only shot. Gran had scribbled something about binding the roots, with offerings, keeping the house settled down. The word, roots, kept nagging at Emily, connecting dots between that leathery thing in the box and the tendril in the photo. She read aloud. "The house takes what you give it. Blood, memory, will. Bind it in the earth, or it binds you." Talk about cryptic. It felt both like a warning and instructions. Gran had known something was off, had fought against it. Mark couldn't stop pacing, throwing nervous glances at the windows. The night outside was unnaturally black, like the stars had been swallowed whole. "We need to torch that thing," he said, jabbing a finger at the box. The root inside looked disturbingly alive now, its veins pulsing faintly under the harsh kitchen light. Emily hesitated. Burning it seemed like playing with fire. What if it just set the tendril loose? What if it pissed off whatever was in the house? Her mind drifted to the garden, the gnarled apple tree, those warm stones she used to collect as a kid. The house had stolen something from her that summer, she was dead certain. Maybe her hair in that box was part of the puzzle, a piece of herself the house had claimed. She locked eyes with Mark. "Gran's ritual. We've got to try it. Bind this thing back to the garden." Mark didn't look convinced but nodded anyway. They were fresh out of options. According to the diary, they needed blood, garden herbs, and some kind of spoken truth under the tree at midnight. Emily checked her phone. 11:45. Clock was ticking. She grabbed a kitchen knife, and they hurried outside to snatch some rosemary and lavender, brittle but still fragrant. The air felt thick as soup, and the tendril's presence seemed stronger out here, a shimmering outline coiling around the apple tree like a snake. Mark clutched the box, jaw clenched tight. Emily pricked her finger with the knife, wincing as blood bubbled up. She let a few drops fall onto the root, which twitched like it was tasting her. The whispers exploded into a wall of sound that made her head pound. "Stay. Stay. Stay." Ignoring it, she crushed the herbs and sprinkled them over the root. Mark dug a small hole at the base of the tree, where the dirt felt weirdly warm to the touch. The spoken truth part had them stumped. Gran's notes didn't explain it, just that it needed to be personal, something the house could hold on to. Emily knelt by the hole, box in hand. She thought about that summer, the blank spots in her memory, the constant feeling of being watched. "I gave you something," she said, voice trembling. "I don't know what exactly, but I was just a kid. I didn't understand. Take it back." The words felt hollow, but the air shifted slightly, the whispers dying down for a heartbeat. Mark placed the box in the hole, and they covered it with dirt. The tendril flickered, growing fainter, like maybe the ritual was actually working. But then the ground shook beneath them, a deep rumble that rattled the garden. The whisper came roaring back, angrier. "Stay." The tendril solidified, no longer just a shadow but something real and terrible, black and glistening, shooting up from the soil like some nightmarish vine. It lashed out, wrapping around Mark's wrist. He yelped, dropping the shovel, and Emily grabbed him, yanking him free. They bolted back to the house, the tendril sinking back into the earth behind them. Inside, the walls were pulsing faster now, the air thick with the smell of wet soil. The Polaroid was sitting on the table again, though Emily could have sworn she'd stuffed it in a drawer. The tendril was back in the picture, but now it wasn't hiding, It was outside her child self, wrapping around her like a noose. Emily's stomach dropped. Their ritual hadn't fixed a damn thing. It had made everything worse. Mark couldn't stop shaking, his wrist angry red where the tendril had grabbed him. "We need to bail, now," he said. Emily nodded, but when they tried the front door, it wouldn't budge an inch. The lock was frozen solid, the handle like it was welded in place. The windows were just as bad, sealed shut. The house had decided they weren't going anywhere. The whispers were deafening now, hammering inside Emily's skull. She clutched the diary, flipping desperately to the last page. Brand's final entry was just one line. "If it wakes, it takes." Emily felt ice in her veins. The house wasn't just holding on to pieces of her childhood, it wanted all of her now, her presence, her life. She looked at Mark, seeing her own terror reflected in his eyes. "We need another way," she said. "Something Grand missed." They tore through the house again, panic driving them forward. Up in the attic, Emily discovered a hidden panel behind an old trunk, revealing a small, dust-covered book. The handwriting wasn't Grand's, it was older, the pages crumbling at the edges. The title sent chills down her spine. The Binding of the Hollow. It described the house as a vessel, built on top of something ancient, something that fed on memory and will. The tendril was its reach, the whisper its voice. The book warned that a failed binding would only make it stronger, and only a complete offering could lock it away for good. Emily's thoughts raced. A complete offering, what the hell did that mean? Her blood hadn't cut it. Her truth hadn't been enough. She pulled out the Polaroid from her pocket. The tendril was moving again, stretching beyond the frame of the photo. The house was wide awake now, and hungry as hell. Mark grabbed her arm, fingers digging in. "We're not giving it another damn thing," he insisted. But deep down, Emily wasn't sure they had any choice left. The whisper had burrowed inside her now, become part of her, and the tendril was just waiting for its moment. Oh man, that house was something else. Like it had a pulse, you know? The walls seemed to breathe in the shadows. They weren't just sitting there, they were dancing around like they had minds of their own. Emily and Mark were up in that musty attic, flipping through this ancient book called The Binding of the Hollow. That gave me the creeps just hearing about it. Poor Emily couldn't shake this voice in her head, this whisper that kept saying, "Stay," over and over, like an ex who can't take a hint. And that weird black tendril thing? It used to just be trapped in that old Polaroid, but now it was slithering through the air like some nightmare come to life. The house was hungry for something, and Emily had this gut feeling she knew exactly what it wanted. According to the book, the house wasn't just a house. It was more like a container for something older than dirt, something living underneath the garden. This thing fed on people's memories and willpower, latching onto anyone who hung around too long. The tendril was how it reached out, the whisper was its way of luring you in. The book mentioned a complete offering, which wasn't spelled out but sounded an awful lot like giving up a piece of yourself. Emily's heart was racing like crazy. Had her grandmother known about this? Had she been feeding this thing something to keep it quiet all these years? Mark was losing it, pacing back and forth in the attic like a caged animal. "Let's just torch the whole damn place," he said, his voice rough with fear. The book, the photo, everything. But Emily wasn't having it. The book warned that destroying the house might just set this thing free to spread beyond their property. They needed to trap it, not release it. She couldn't stop touching that worn-out Polaroid, where the tendril was now wrapping itself around her childhood self, turning what used to be a smile into something that looked more like pain. She thought back to those summer visits as a kid, the blank spots in her memory, those weirdly warm stones, the whispers she'd brushed off as just her imagination running wild. The house had taken something from her back then, a little piece of her essence. That lock of hair they'd found in the box proved it. But why her specifically? Why now? The book talked about a keeper, someone connected to the house by blood or choice. It hit her. Gran had been the keeper, and all those rituals were just her desperate attempts to keep this thing under control. Now that Gran was gone, the house had its sights set on Emily. "We've got to finish what Gran started," she said, somehow keeping her voice steady despite being scared out of her mind. Mark tried to argue, but she held up the book. "It's this or we're toast. We either bind this thing or it takes us." According to the book, there was one last step. The keeper had to willingly give up a piece of themselves, not just blood, but a memory, something vital, under the tree at exactly midnight. They headed back to the garden, where the air was thick with the smell of dirt and rot. That apple tree looked menacing now, its branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The tendril was everywhere, a web of shadows pulsing in time with the house. Emily checked her phone, 11:55 p.m. Clock was ticking. She pricked her finger again, letting blood drip into the soil while Mark, hands shaking like leaves, crushed more herbs over where they buried the box. Emily stared at the Polaroid, which now barely showed her childhood self. The tendril had practically swallowed her whole. She closed her eyes, digging deep for a memory to offer up. The book said it had to be something real, something that made her who she was. She remembered that summer, digging under the tree as a kid and finding a stone that felt warm to the touch. She'd heard the whisper then, soft and inviting, and she'd answered, "I'll stay." She hadn't had a clue what she was promising. "I gave you my word," she said, her voice cracking. "But I was just a kid. I didn't understand. Take it back." She ripped the Polaroid in half and dropped the pieces. The tendrils surged up from the ground like a black wave, wrapping around her legs. Mark yelled and grabbed her, but this thing was strong, dragging her toward the tree. She could feel it inside her head, pulling at her memories, her will, her very life. "I don't belong to you," she forced out through gritted teeth. She jammed the knife into the ground right where the box was buried. The earth shook, and the tendril pulled back, flickering like a bad TV signal. The whisper turned into a scream that rattled the windows. Emily kept talking, louder now. "You've got my hair, my blood, my promise. That's enough. Stay in the ground where you belong." She dumped the herbs into the hole, her hands finally steady. The tendril slunk back into the soil, the whisper fading to a mumble. The air went still, and the house's heartbeats slowed down. Mark helped her up, looking relieved but still pale as a ghost. The garden was quiet now, the tree just looking like a regular old tree again. Emily felt lighter somehow, like she'd put down a heavy backpack, but she knew deep down the house wasn't finished with them. It was trapped for now, not gone for good. They left the garden, taking the book and knife with them. The front door opened easily now, and the windows weren't sealed shut anymore. They drove to the motel in silence. Emily kept the torn pieces of the Polaroid in her pocket. She couldn't bring herself to look at them, but she could feel them there, a reminder of what she'd given up. The next morning, they went back to the house, cautious but determined. The air felt different, lighter, but Emily knew they weren't out of the woods yet. According to the book, the binding wouldn't last forever. The house would wake up again someday. She decided to sell the place, let it become someone else's problem. But as they were packing up Gran's stuff, she found another photo hidden in a book in the attic. It showed Mark at age 10, standing in the garden. And behind him, a tendril, creeping out of the frame.